Egyptian hieroglyph. The word hieroglyph comes from the Greek hieros, sacred, and glyphos, words or signs. The first known example of hieroglyphic writing in ancient Egypt was discovered on bone and ivory tags, pottery vessels, and clay seal impressions discovered in a pre-dynastic tomb in Abydos, which is dated to between 3400 and 3200 BC, while the latest was made on the gatepost of the Temple of Philae in 394 AD. Knowledge of the hieroglyphic script was lost until the early 19th century, when Jean-Francis Champollion used the Rosetta Stone to decipher the script. The ancient Egyptian word for hieroglyphs literally translates as language of the gods, indicates their importance. Priests used hieroglyphs to write down prayers, magical texts, and texts related to life after death, and worshipping the gods. When preparing their tombs, many people had autobiographies and hieroglyphic guides to the afterworld written on the surface of tomb walls and on the inside of coffins, believing that these texts helped guide the dead through the afterlife. Yet, the use of hieroglyphic inscription was not limited to religious purposes. Civil officials used them to write royal documents of long-term importance, to record historical events, and to document calculations, such as the depth of the Nile River on a specific day of the year. Besides, the Egyptians also used hieroglyphs for decorative purposes. The hieroglyphic system used in ancient Egypt had between 700 and 800 basic symbols called glyphs, which are divided into two groups: phonograms that represent sounds, and ideograms representing objects or ideas. Hieroglyphs are time-consuming to produce and require a great deal of skill and knowledge. So, it is only in the early period that we find hieroglyphs written on every type of material and for every purpose. By the first dynasty, around 2900 BC, the Egyptians had developed a simplified cursive script known as hieratic, which was based on hieroglyphics. But the signs were greatly simplified and so better suited to writing on papyrus. During the 7th century BC, the Egyptians began using demotic, which was even more simplified than hieratic, for business and literary texts. We know little about the early development of Egyptian hieroglyphs. Some scholars suggested that the ancient Egyptians borrowed the idea of writing from Sumerian cuneiform, writing in Mesopotamia, though a direct link between the Mesopotamian script and the hieroglyphics is unlikely due to the differences in the written language. There is some evidence of a Mesopotamian influence on pre-dynastic Egyptian culture, such as the use of cylindrical seals and the mythical beasts depicted on the Narmer palette. But there was no evidence of an Egyptian influence in Mesopotamia at the time. However, inscription dating from the reign of Scorpion King, roughly 3400 BC, have led many to suggest that Egyptian hieroglyphs may have preceded the Mesopotamian scripts. Though the Mesopotamian logograms, where a picture represented a word, were developed as early as 8000 BC, a recognizable system of logograms and the phonetic script did not develop until about 3200 to 3100 BC. However, the early hieroglyphic script found in Abydos already included short phrases and so is comparatively developed. After the fall of ancient Egyptian civilization in 30 BC, the meaning of hieroglyphs remained a mystery for about 1,800 years. Then, during the French occupation of Egypt, from 1798 to 1801, a group of French soldiers and engineers uncovered a large stone known as the Rosetta Stone. This stone bore an ancient inscription containing the same text written 3 different ways in hieroglyphs, in the Demotic script and in ancient Greek. The stone was taken to Europe, where scholars translated the ancient Greek and used the information to try to decipher the other 2 texts. Yet, it was not until Jean-Francis Champollion that modern people were able to read hieroglyphs. After examining many cartouches, carved oblong loops, he observed that certain glyphs in the cartouches phonetically spelled out the names of certain Greek rulers of Egypt. He further discovered an indigenous reading of ideograms in other cartouches. Such discovery showed him definitively that there were 2 categories of glyphs: phonograms and ideograms. The work of deciphering the hieroglyphs went on after Champollion's death, and continues up to the present day, continually providing new information about life in ancient Egypt.